nature preschool that's kind of in development right now.
Wonderful. I hope you gather some ideas today, Savannah.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Well, as we go through, hopefully we get that chat box up and running for you all. And then you can drop your name and where you're from and location in there. But some points to ponder and to consider today is thinking about what outdoor areas are nearby and usable, and specifically what affordances do you have at those locations that lend themselves to outdoor learning, outdoor play, and how the children interact in those specific spaces.
Yeah, so Sarah and I both work for some pretty large institutions, and our outdoor space can be a little intimidating for people, but we're going to look at our space from a macro to micro level. The Arboretum does have 1,700 acres of forest, lakes, rivers, ponds, creeks, berries, savannas, all of it. But these are also very manicured and pristine spaces. Not all of them, but a lot of it. And I work for a tree museum, and you wouldn't climb the paintings at an art museum, right? So I had to work through some institutional mindsets and find those spaces that were off the map or seldom visited by our guests. And those unmanicured areas where the kids could be kids, where they could just touch and climb and explore nature as they learn to develop a love and kinship for their environment.
Looks like we got the chat going. Awesome. And then much like Megan, our space is a little bit smaller. We have 400 acres, but 27 different gardens, and we are considered a living museum. And so something really important to us was working within our institution and working with the gardeners so that the gardeners realized the children's love and interest in the outdoors. So when they did when they saw us climbing trees or digging in the soil, they understood that there was a great connection being built and foundation for the children. And also our relationship was already built up with the gardeners. So they now support us more and look for branches that may come down or making sure trees are safe with us. So really utilizing who you have on staff can help develop your program to be more communal. All right. And even though we both have these big institutions and various manicured spaces and places, I really like to advocate for using what you have. This right here is a tree that's literally right next door to our school. And yet there are many learning opportunities for the children. Even though it's a small space, they're small people and they don't need big spaces or big places to really go out and explore in. So really work with what you got. And then when I'm looking for a space to take the children, how do you find these wild, unmanicured spaces that are appropriate for play? I personally look for something called natural affordances. And this is what the space has to offer in terms of play and how the children can interact there. So is there a hill for running or rolling something down? Is there a low-lying area that's going to flood in the spring that you can have puddles in? Are there sticks for building, trees for climbing? And so how are the children playing? Are they running? Are they skipping? Are they climbing? Are they hiding? So really looking at the space and thinking about what's there and how the children are going to interact with it.
Okay, speaking of affordances, I love this infographic that advocates for nature as the third teacher, which is a very Reggio approach to learning. Are the children just playing? Nope. This is whole child development through the natural affordances. They are exploring different textures, working on gross motor skills, testing balance and strength, working on communication and collaboration, exploring the plant life cycle, experiencing cause and effect, and learning to love and care for living things. Play is learning. Okay, so what do our play spaces look like? These are some photos from both of our spaces, and really they represent things that you could put into play no matter where you're at, if you have a fenced in area or even just a concrete free play space. And I call my space my outdoor classroom. And so these are some of the things that could be included in there. We have a gathering space on the upper left, sensory bins, and then a plexi art wall on the right where the kids can be inspired by the nature that they see around them. That's my tinker table on the lower left, and we'll go into detail about what we do there in a little bit. Mud kitchen right in the middle, that's Sarah's mud kitchen, and that's Sarah's raised bed on the lower right. So today we're going to be focusing in on tinker tables, mud kitchens, and raised bed, and what you can do in those spaces. And as you're looking at our spaces, just keep in mind that there are many Pinterest ideas and DIY ideas for mud kitchens and sensory bins and garden beds that can be done on like a super teeny tiny budget, or through utilizing your local resources like Eagle Scout projects, youth groups, vocational school projects. Don't forget about them. They are always looking for some good projects. They made a stage and some benches for myself as well. Okay. All right, so here is one of the raised beds at a previous program where my students got to experience the full plant life cycle. You can see in this picture, it is spring greens, and they got to eat the food that came from the earth. So we talked about where food comes from, and they also got to plant and eat a rainbow. I love Lois Ellert books. Those two are some of my favorites. And anytime you can connect what they're doing to literacy, to story, all awesome. Okay. Another one of my favorite books, Up, Down, and Around. We actually grew things that grew up, down, and around, like gourds and corn and beans and potatoes in our Three Sisters garden. And then we sorted out their harvest onto picnic tables into things that grew up, down, or around, and it gave them that really hands-on experience.
One of our favorite botanic garden are herbs. So here there's cilantro and parsley and green onions and winter savory, which somehow is still green today, and the children were cutting it yesterday. And so I just want to make note that you're seeing raised garden beds here. They're in place and they're beautiful, but 5-gallon buckets, drill holes in the bottom. You can have gardening spaces too. They don't have to be like this. And gardening is just such a way to get the children's hands in the soil and making those connections. So after noticing that the children here were really interested working with their spray bottles every day, taking care of the garden, we then provided a few more tools. We provided scissors and buckets, and you'll see in the back right-hand corner, there's a market. We've added play money. And so all this natural play really lent itself to talking about where food comes from. And, it doesn't just come from a grocery store, we can grow it. In times before this, we may make different sauces or salads, a caprese salad or chimichurri sauce, and try it. So pre-COVID, we would definitely snack on our garden, but I definitely recommend herbs since they're so easy to work with. And then we utilize gardening throughout the season. So this is in late fall. Again, we're working with someone on our staff. His name is Chester, and Chester taught us how to plant these bulbs, of how to put the roots down facing the soil. And what's really cool is that we began to watch the seasons change and count the days until our bulbs sprouted. And the children then knew not to step on this garden bed, even through the winter, because their plants were sleeping. And it's just great to think about what's happening beneath our feet, even though we can't see what's going on down there. So once the bulbs sprouted, these are onions, but you can also use tulips and or daffodils. Once they sprouted, we began measuring them and taking care of them. So it gave us something to look forward to through the winter season.
Okay, so the picture on the left here is my previous mud kitchen, which is better than my actual kitchen in my home. It's huge. It has a working sink, running water, and those are granite countertops. I am kind of envious, but we just knew places that were getting rid of some of these materials, and we had some really motivated parents who were willing to help build this for us. So we lucked out because that was a dilapidated basketball court that was sitting on right there. And then the mud kitchen that you see on the right is my current mud kitchen. It's more of a mud cabin. There's just some boxes in there that have muffin tins and bundt pans and teapots and spoons and spatulas and whisks, all the fun things that the kids can utilize when they're creating in their mud kitchens. So here are some activities that you can do there. Save those pumpkin guts. They're so much fun to squeeze between your fingers, and you can count seeds and you can pull out the seeds and make designs with them. You can utilize colored water in a spray bottle. You can spray the muffins that you're making in our snow kitchen. That's what the kids called it for several months this year, the snow kitchen. And now it's back to being the mud kitchen. They're so excited. What are things you can do there? Pouring, measuring, weighing, comparing, experiencing volume, exploring symmetry. Check out the picture on the lower right. That child is putting birthday candles, AKA pine cones, into her birthday cake. So you can explore symmetry in myriad ways at the mud kitchen as well. And then you can see that there's, go ahead, you can go forward. Thank you. Color mixing, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. If you just let the kids kind of explore the different types of soils and sands, add water and just like a little drop of dish soap in there to help disperse the paint colors. My favorite kind of color to use with this is food gel. So it's not the normal food dye, it's the thicker gel. It seems to hold better and disperse amongst the mud paint, and then still kind of seep through the brown mud color that we have here in Illinois. They're deep, rich soil that we have. Great, okay.
So perhaps you don't have a mud kitchen. There are definitely easy do-it-yourself projects out there on Pinterest, but the easiest that I found is a take-along mud kitchen. And I literally have a tote bag filled with all these kitchen containers, and it comes with us almost everywhere that we go. So this is where I think about those natural affordances. Is there going to be mud? Is there going to be leaves or pine cones or things to collect and create in the kitchen with? And it's for all seasons, right? So a great way to acquire these pieces is to ask families for their donations, and or my favorite is going to the thrift store and rummaging through the bins and finding things for 50 cents. And then mud kitchens are for every season, right? The picture here on the right, we created ice balls, filled up balloons with some colored water, and the children played with their ice here, and we've been using it in the winter with our snow as well. And then just keeping in mind that natural affordances are great, but also loose parts such as wine corks or perhaps silk flowers can add an element of color or different pieces for patterning. And it's totally okay to incorporate these loose parts in the outdoors as well.
Totally, you're reducing, reusing, and recycling. That's what you're teaching them with that love of nature. And also, I often get parents who say to me that they'll take one for the team and bring me in some wine corks. That's their duty.
Yeah.
And also, another place to get these amazing loose parts is through Scarce. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. It's great. These are photos of my Tinker table. I love that Sarah wrote, if you build it, they will come. We utilize this Tinker table every day, especially during the pandemic, for just a multitude of uses. But this was an Eagle Scout project, and he made that table super long for me to my specifications and low enough for, that's a four-year-olds that you'll see on the right, to stand there and be able to work with that. So I also use this as my maker space, and it's where we spread out for arts and crafts and blocks and rock stacking, science experiments, potting plants, any sort of tool working. Okay, so in this picture, this is a 3-year-old. We had created shapes, and the kids were using those loose parts and natural parts to trace the shapes. If your kids are old enough to hold a crayon or marker, have them draw their own shapes and then trace it out with natural materials. Just use developmentally appropriate practice. And then what you see on the bottom right is just some like habitat play. We were talking about what lives in the grass, and we brought out blocks and rocks and some plastic creatures. If you're in an urban space, we had so much fun creating a cityscape with our table, I got those blocks that look like houses from the Target dollar bin. And the kids were just enthralled with these little wooden cars. And we had started to draw some roads for them, and then they took it from there because they saw what was laying out when they got there. And we didn't give them any explanation. They just ran with it. They saw that we had colored in a pond and some other things. So they started becoming civil engineers. And really, this could be very place-based. It could mirror the neighborhood that they are in. Then they noticed that as the sun moved, shadows started to form, and they started moving the buildings and exploring with shadows and lights. So I moved just a movable table over to our plexi art wall, and I strung up a line with some clips on it, and the kids went out and they gathered leaves, and we hung the leaves up, and you can't really see it because the sun had changed a little bit by the time I took this picture. But they were able to trace the leaves and talk about comparing the shapes and the sizes of the leaves and how many points were on there. So it really turned into a very organic, awesome moment.
And we kind of had the same experience with chalk. The girl on the left here asked, Miss Sarah, can we have chalk? Yeah, why not? It's the middle of winter. Chalk's appropriate, right? Yeah, be a yes teacher. And so they began using their chalk on their wood cookies. And I asked, tell me about what you're making. And then they started sorting their wood cookies to be blueberry muffins and chocolate chip cookies. And they're decorating them differently. And then in the next two pictures, you'll see we also add in water or paintbrushes or sponges. So they're kind of figuring out what happens when you run water over chalk, or what happens when you dip the chalk in the water and then draw with it. It's really cool. It gets kind of squishy and really vibrant. Or even what's happening when you draw with chalk in the snow and that color pops, but then the snow melts. So we're really just doing some investigating and experimenting, looking at different shapes and colors and patterns here. And then when we think of tinkering, I love thinking of tinkering recipes. This was for a snow kano. And so the children would follow the recipe and they go down the line and they get 1 cup and then their baking soda and their 2 squirts of water and their soap and XYZ. And then they would gather around and need to bury their cup in the snow. And this picture on the bottom here is just really a testament of how cool this tinkering recipe was. The children wanted to watch each other's volcanoes and were really careful not to step or budge and make space for everyone, right? They're in that like perfect environmental educator U shape right there. And they're talking about the flow. And this boy has a rake and he wants to help the flow. So he's making a track for the cano to flow down. And Pierre here on the left is noticing, like, look at the bubbles they're raising up and then they get harder. So by simply offering the opportunity, there's a lot of language being developed here and a lot of scientific thinking going on. We also use tinkering recipes to create salads for the animals. Perhaps it's for the solstice or the equinox that we'll take 1 carrot and 2 celeries and 3 scoops of cranberries and 1 dollop of birdseed and chop. And we'll give the children real knives. You can find children's knives on Amazon to do that kind of work with as well. So tinkering recipes are a great way for those literacy skills and communication and social skills. And then this is one of my favorites this winter. You can do it in the spring too. We just replicated this and added some hibiscus, rose petals, and chamomile to make tea. But this experiment here, the children asked me one morning, where did the ice come from, Miss Sarah? Because I had frozen ice for them to play with. And I let them know I mixed colors and put it in the freezer and asked, would you like to make some too? Of course they would. So we put tape on our buckets and the color in the bucket coordinated with what was on the outside. And I was like, we're going to make a rainbow. And I demonstrated every color and was like, oh man, I made brown. And so the children came up with the idea of only 1 or 2 colors, and they start adding rocks and pine cones for sink and float. And they're experiencing the volume here. I mean, they caught on pretty quick. The bigger the container, the more liquid and more things you could put in it. And then the next day we came back. It was in the middle of winter, so we just left them outside. And it was, well, how do we get them out? Well, I don't know. How could you? So Andrew in the back here, you see his cup, it's upside down. And his idea is to smash it on the table, and another child places it in the sun, and another child smashes it with a mallet, and other kids are tip, tip, tapping. And so, you know, there's this big idea of experimentation and hypothesis, and how what we think is going to happen and then what happens when we actually do it. So this was one of my favorite projects. Add some tea concoctions this spring and make tea sundaes if you'd like. And then another way to tinker, this is our make and take, a great way to reduce and reuse. We ask parents and or our community here at the garden, pre-COVID, of course, to send in their clean donations. And this is a way for the children to be the leader in their own creative process and following their interests. If they like dinosaurs, they're going to build a dinosaur. If they're interested in towers and engineering, they're going to build that tower. And after tinkering here a bit, we begin to expand thinking into planning, writing down the steps they want to follow, coordinating that, and then following through. And this is just such a fun way to incorporate engineering, art, recycling, and moving that abstract idea into the concrete.
So I actually pilfered these pictures from the internet because I didn't have any of my table handy. But these are really good examples of what I already do at my tinker table. And so loose parts like wood blocks or tree cookies, and I see that some of you work for forest preserves, so just ask your crew to cut up some tree cookies for you. Bits of fabric, bottle caps, all of those things are available to the children. I don't put like that much out at one time. Sometimes less is more. It gets a little overwhelming if you have a lot out on your table. And word to the wise, those little tiny bottle caps are hard for little fingers. Put a nail in and then try to like hold that in and then try to hammer on top of. So if you're going to use bottle caps, always pre-drill the holes ahead of time. And you can also pre-drill the holes that you can see on that car there so that they can stick a little wooden peg person in there or stick a little wine cork person in there. Whatever you've got, make use of that. Also include glue. Paint and markers are usually part of our process as well. Some of my kids shy away from the tools a little bit, and that's fine. They can work on the side and be painting at the same time or paint some of the finished products that the others have made. That's all up to them and what they want to get out of that experience. Okay. So what is in my toolbox so the kids can experiment with force and fine motor skills? The tools are super, super important. And I always tell the kids when they use them, they're important too. And you can see them puff up their chest and take pride in their work. And you can tell that they are really feeling important when they get to use tools. So in order for that to happen, we have great big discussions before they even touch a tool. We talk about tool care. We talk about tool respect and respecting their safety bubble around them. But here are the favorites that I've pulled out to highlight for you guys. The rasp files, hand drills are a favorite, hammers, and I use the one that you see on the lower right so that it's a small hand hammer instead of one of those long ones for the kiddos. Goggles, I just don't use those this year during the pandemic. Veggie peelers for whittling, a vise so the kids can put their wood in the block and not have to hold it if they're hammering. And then, of course, a saw, which I'll show you in just a second. But all of these tools promote that hand-eye coordination, fine motor, sequencing of steps, and following directions, and so much more. And if you guys ever want to learn more about risk-benefit assessments before engaging in these types of activities, just reach out to either Sarah or myself for further professional development on this. Both of us took a course at Antioch, a week-long course on safety and how to utilize tools with children.
I think the biggest thing is one risk, one teacher. So if you're using tools, that is the only thing that teacher is focusing on. No bathroom breaks, no social dilemmas. It's strictly that teacher is focusing on tools. But here are a few books that kind of give a nod to engineering or architect or building, but also growth mindset and perseverance. So Rosie Revere is a super great book. Rosie, where other people see rubbish, Rosie sees inspiration. So I like it for the make and take it. Jabari Tries speaks specifically to feelings of frustration, which is so important to help our children communicate their own feelings. And then through flexibility and teamwork, he creates this awesome invention with other people. And the last is Box of Text. Box of Text is about two children and they are competing against each other. And this, then all of a sudden they work with one another in this competition and they still don't win, but they win in friendship. So I really like that it talks about not winning and how that's okay because, teamwork makes the dream work and these children won friendship in the end.
Growth mindset is what it's all about. That's what's going to serve them well when they get out into the real world, right? We're not really preparing them for the next grade level. We are preparing them for life. And I wish that we could, drum that through to the powers that be.
Real tools. Yeah.
That's right. So Sarah was just talking about using tools and the ratios. In the upper left, you can see a kiddo and myself working with a saw. That is a one-on-one. That was his first time using a saw. I was right there with him the whole time watching everything he did. The child in the middle is whittling, and I can't remember, I'm sure one of you guys will know this. It was an invasive bush that she was whittling and had purple underneath. It was like a pinkish purple color as she whittled off the bark. And then, so after they would saw a branch and they would whittle it, then they would sand it and stain it, and they made themselves a walking stick that you can see down below. And each of their little hiking sticks had a colored bandana on it so that if they put it down in the forest, we could actually find it amongst all of the other sticks. And they also had that personal connection to their stick. That was their stick. That was ownership and pride in their work. And at the end of the year, they took it home. And I still have kids telling me 5 years later that they still have their hiking stick and they absolutely love it. Point of pride. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is this year's emergent curriculum that popped up in my classroom. I was inspired by that photo that you see in the upper left by Margarita Hughes. And I said, ooh, I want to do this. I mean, talk about, you've got fine motor, you've got inclusion, you've got diversity, you've got everything going on that is just right for these little kiddos to grab a hold and run with. So you can see the picture in the upper middle, a child had whittled, they made a face, that was their gnome, they called it. At the same time, my mom had gifted me these 40 metal Band-Aid boxes that were in her basement. If you ever need supplies and they're not as scarce, ask me, they're probably in my mom's basement. And I thought, what am I gonna do with 40 metal Band-Aid boxes? Well, I spray painted them with chalkboard paint, gave the kids chalkboard markers, and those became their gnome homes. And if you look really closely in that bottom middle picture on the left, you can see that one of my students has a very good sense of humor. It says, my gnome can bite. And so at the same time, it's like all of these planets aligning together. They were also interested in the compass rose that is printed at the Morton Arboretum and the sidewalk near our drop-off. So every time we went somewhere in the snow, we would just ground them in their surroundings, help them with their wayfinding skills by drawing a compass rose in the snow and orienting them. And they would hide these little gnomes all over the place and give clues to their friends. We modeled it first and then they did it. No, it's a little more to the north. Oh, step a little more to the west. And they were giving themselves navigational hints on where they were hiding. Then they started drawing maps. And they have been drawing maps of every place we go now. And so I always take a whiteboard with me and a dry erase marker, and they'll put an X where they hide it. They'll draw the map, they'll put an X where they hide it and have their friends go find it. And you can see in the lower right, even in their journals, they're drawing maps of their bedroom. They're now including a compass rose in there as
Thanks for sharing your favorite tools, Megan. You do a lot of work with whittling and peelers. That's awesome. The tool that is shown here is called a microplane. It's just another kind of rasp. But these microplanes in particular work really well and really quickly for children to see that sawdust coming up. And they're so safe. We say one risk, one teacher, but truly these microplanes I put out as a play invitation. You can see on sticks in the forest. It doesn't really matter if we're in a classroom space or not. And the children can come and go as they please. And they are really safe because you can use that microplane on your skin and it doesn't do anything. It won't cut you. And so you can make grooves in sticks or make drumsticks or hiking sticks to decorate them with, or even carve little figurines. You can find microplanes that are rounded, are squared off, have a point. And so I think this is just one of those really safe tools that can be used to interact with the environment, no matter kind of where you are. And then at the garden, I've been doing a lot of thinking the past 5 years about what a tool is. And it's not just woodworking tools, but tools for real life experiences. And so we use rakes as a tool frequently in the fall and in the spring again. And so thinking about where to take these rakes to, potentially someplace with leaves. Maybe you'll rake a huge leaf pile, which takes teamwork and collaboration and crossing that midline, which you want for pre-literacy skills, right? And if you don't have that someplace, in our outdoor classroom, we take apart a hay bale and we let the children rake hay. And then in the picture on the right, same thing. You can use pine needles as well. So thinking about tools as a way to interact with your space as well. Another one are these shovels. So the little girl on the right is using this red shovel, and note the difference. The one on the right is really sturdy and it's perfectly child size, and they're able to really stand on the shovel and push down and pull, kind of use their body as a tool with this, compared to the shovel on the left that's a little more flimsy and it's more for snow. So when thinking about tools to interact with in your environment, you're wanting to look for quality tools too, because if not, the children will become frustrated and they won't become used as readily here. Another shovel that we love to use and utilize frequently are hand trowels. These ones are Fiskars. They are great. They don't rust. They're not too sharp for the kids. And one of our favorite activities here is looking for worms. So we'll just take bins with us no matter where we go, and these shovels as well. And we'll look for critters that are creeping and crawling under the ground. And then the last piece that I didn't really think about as a tool were brooms, until one winter we had no snow and we had to do something. And so I just kept putting brooms out, right? And so the children would kind of figure out that the sandbox was frozen and they couldn't sweep the sand back in, or they'd try and clean their house space. So kind of a way to bring in some imaginative play. The little girl on the right here is experimenting with 2 different kinds of brooms of which sweeps better. And she was really studying and experimenting each one. They've been used for tools that are non-conventional ways to measure which broom, measuring their trees with brooms as well. So just these unconventional tools, but still tools nonetheless, that help children learn real life skills, and again, real work for real kids. This picture here are galvanized buckets. We take galvanized buckets with us pretty frequently, and we'll be including a resource guide and link after our presentation today that will show you where we got these buckets. So we, again, thinking about terms of affordances, what can you collect? Are there crab apples? Are there pine cones? Can you sort them, compare them, contrast them? Can you, make groups with them? So lots of math and science that goes along with these buckets. It's a must-have. These are my favorites.
I do love buckets as well. So I put some of my favorite tools on the next 3 slides, and binoculars are always at the tip top. But if you don't have a budget for the real tools for the kids, it's okay to make them out of the TP toilet paper tubes, and it essentially does the same thing by focusing a child in on what they're looking at. The tool in the middle is called a magic magnifier, and you can see that my little buddy Clayton there found something that started with the letter N. He found his nose. Real simple and easy to make this, and also a really inexpensive alternative to magnifiers, because we all know those magnifiers are junked by the end of the year. They get so scratched, right? You always have to buy new. So I just cut it out. It almost looks like a door hanger, like at a hotel room or something. You just cut the circle out of the middle of a rectangular piece of construction paper. I laminate it, and then you can use dry erase crayons because it's harder for the kids to move them to, just brush up and erase what you've got on there. You can put shapes on there, letters on there, numbers on there, so that when they're going out into nature with you, they're looking for maybe 3 of something, 3 rocks, 3 sticks, 3 oak leaves. They're looking for something that is square because you've drawn a square on there. So these magic magnifiers can be used over and over again and again. Make them out of different colors. They can look for things outside in those colors as well. You can ask them to look for buds on plants coming out right now. It would be a good time for that. They can look for birds. They can look for squirrels or animal homes or insects. And then, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. There's some real magnifiers that we were using. Don't forget to use it in the snow as well. Sometimes we forget to use those tools for snow. And for plants and insects and dirt and rocks. And the child in the lower left is using scissors to trim the grass, and she's watching herself do it underneath the magnifier, which think about all the stuff she's got going on and also crossing that midline at the same time. So she's engaging and firing all the synapses in her brain at one time. And then another easy tool to overlook is just a flashlight. Even in daylight, kids love flashlights. So they can go outside and spot certain things with their flashlights. Scales are a great tool for comparing all sorts of natural materials, shells, pine needles, plant materials from the garden. The photo on the right showcases beakers and cups and spray bottles, which allows the children the affordance of exploring properties of water, color mixing, volume.
And then, we've been talking about all these different tools and how we interact in our environment, and much of it's play-based, but there's so much learning going on. And so I wanted to also showcase some emergent curriculum ideas that pop up with the seasons. When the seasons change, right? That's what the children are going to be interested in. And this picture right here was a rainy day, and puddles were all around, and we became worm rescuers, and we helped those worms out of the puddles back into the soil. And the children felt so much pride that they were helping the earth. They're making that contact and connection. So if it rains and there's worms out, we just ditch every plan that we have and go look for the worms, because that's what they're interested in, and it's what's happening seasonally as well. And then one of my favorites is a vermicompost bin, which is just a worm compost bin. Our resource guide will have instructions, but again, another way for care and contact and learning about decomposers and what's happening under the soil, measuring the worms, comparing the worms, looking up close, trying to find their body parts. So worms are a big emergent curriculum in the springtime. And then we also like to ask these really big thinking questions. What do we know? What do we want to know? And it can help showcase where the children are at and also lead your curriculum a bit more, right, with what they're interested in. Going with the seasons, we love to explore with the wind, and these are just some silk scarves that we have that we found off Amazon, and we help teach the children how to do that knot and tie it onto the stick, and they're experimenting, watching the colors change. If they hide behind the tree, can the wind find them? So we almost like wind, hide and go seek. So we go with what's ever happening in the season. These scarves stay at school, but we also extend this project to go home as well. We have tulle, like the fabric tulle, skirts can be made out of, and we'll allow the children to choose their own colors, and we'll tie them onto their own sticks, and they can paint their sticks with acrylic paint. And so it's just a really great extension of what's happening seasonally. And another example of that is springtime babies or buds or flowers. And so you'll notice that in these photos, all the children are wearing raincoats. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable to be outdoors in the rain, and it may be something really foreign. But what I have found a great trick is let the children become the rain. Then they have more of a purpose to be out in the rain. And so there are little rain clouds here spraying their springtime babies, taking care of them. And this might be something that we take along on a hike or we put out in our outdoor classroom for exploration. Rule of thumb, though, is we say wet nature and dry friends. Otherwise, they love to spray each other. So we nip that one in the bud real quick. Wet nature and dry friends here. And then we often observe before we play. This is a word story that we wrote about puddles. So it was super rainy, and we went out and we investigated the puddles and we described them. And so we're building on our literacy here, and also our focus and our intention of what's happening in front of us, and became this really beautiful story that is forever sent home with the parents that the children helped write. And then this is some mud play here. We really try and say yes, or at least I try and say yes, thinking about what the learning is and why I would want to say no. I might want to say no because they're going to get messy. Does that hurt the child? Heck no. There's so much learning going on here. We'll take rulers for measuring our puddles. This is one of our take-along mud kitchens that they're experimenting with. And look at the concentration of the boy on the right. He's just fascinated of what's going on in there. So we like to take tongs along with this as well. There's scooping, there's measuring, there's pouring, there's gross motor, there's balance, there's coordination. Like you can check all those learning standards off through mud play. And then I just want to leave this last photo here as a testament to the joy that children can feel when they're allowed to play in the mud and get mucky, mucky, mucky like this. And then we'll strip them out of their gear before we send them home and put their gear in the bag, and they may load up in the car barefoot. And then after that, we may send a letter to the parents explaining the benefit of mud play, so they're on the same page with us, because it can be a surprise when you pick up your child and they look like this.
Glorious mud. Who doesn't love mud? I still love it, and I'm almost 50. So the birds are coming back to our area. Holla, they're coming back. It means spring's coming. And the kiddos begin to hear those calls or see the flashes of those birds. So that's the moment to jump on it and stick their curiosity and provide them with bird guides. Or you can make a bird tally sheet. Like you see in the lower right, we had bird feeders at our last program. And I just printed out like 4 or 5 pictures of the common birds that we see at our feeders. And every time they saw a new one land, they would make a tally mark. And then on the upper right of that photo, that's okay, was an identifier. And that's really good for utilizing their sense of hearing as they hear the bird calls, like the spring's here from the chickadee that they're hearing right now. And if you don't have an identifier, just print out a sheet of mnemonics and it'll tell you how to make the bird calls. Okay, I'm gonna probably skip this one, Sarah, so that because it looks like we're getting crunched for time. I can come back to that if we have extra time. This is just if you have access for creek hikes. I'm guessing most of you do it because I see a lot of environmental ed people in here, and we were finding fish, crayfish, macroinvertebrates. Bring along your guides, your buckets, your pipettes, your magnifiers, your nets. Anytime they're looking at a guide that is pre-literacy. And you bring the tools, the kids will know exactly what to do to satiate their curiosity. Okay, you can explore water movement by building and racing boats, and you can build your vocabulary and talking about what's faster, what's slower, you know, the flow. You can talk about so many things with the kids, and just every time they hear these new science terms, it's building onto their vocabulary, and it's super important to not shy away from using science words with the kiddos. They especially love the word scat. That's like my kid's favorite word. Okay. Yep, engage those senses. We are out right now looking for the spring ephemerals that are popping up. And if you don't have, that's my favorite word too. I think there's like, I don't know, I feel like a fourth grade boy or something sometimes. I just, it's probably why I do what I do. So if you don't have access to a plant guide, you can make one, just print something off from the internet. And again, you can turn it into a graph or a chart if you want to make this more math-based. And then they can go out and find these things that are popping up right now. I can't wait to see some skunk cabbage. Okay. And these are just two of my favorite spring books to read with my kiddos, especially the Wake Up book, because that does have the plants that you would see in our area right now. Ooh, okay. So how do we foster deep critical thinking with our students? In lieu of quiz questions that set the child up for a right or wrong answer, which also promotes that fixed mindset response, or that stress that a child knows that you know the right answer, you're just waiting to hear it pop out of their mouth or be regurgitated. We can pique their interest and their curiosity and love of learning by modeling our own curiosity and becoming co-learners through well-placed ponderings. So I like to think of myself as a guide on the side and not a sage on the stage. We are definitely co-workers with them. And that takes out that power play that's in I don't know, that you can kind of see in more traditional education programs. And then it really opens up a child to wondering along with you. I swear my students must think I'm just a total idiot, because I do a lot of wondering all the time. My sentences start with "I notice" or "I wonder." Mark, I know you know these words because you worked with Marilyn, and so these are right up your alley. But these are the kind of questions that will extend their learning and open up a really rich dialogue with those students. Yep.
And then here's an example of it in action. This was our snow mountain, and it's a snowplow mound, and we would go climb it with safety cones in the parking lot. But we went there so many times this winter because it was cold and gross motor, yay, keeps us warm. And we go one day, it's like our first nice day, and it's melting. And so I wonder out loud, I was like, what do you notice? And the little boy on the right was like, whoa, when I put my gloves in, bubbles come up. And I was like, I wonder why. And he's like, oh, there must be air in my gloves in the padding or whatever. I was like, yeah. Little boy on the right, same question. What do you notice? He's like, it's flowing, Miss Sarah. It's moving. And I was like, yeah, I wonder why. Again, our kids probably think we're just like not very bright. And then the experiment just continues on. Our whole group was here, and I was like, I wonder what's happening to our snow mountain. They're like, it's melting, Miss Sarah. But why? Because of the sun, because it's warm. Continuing on, it's like, they're bailing the water now. They're like following the flow of the water, and we don't have the mud kitchen on this day. Like, of course we don't have it. And so we allow them the opportunity to take their cones and they start scooping, but you notice it starts getting kind of busy here. And the question is like, where do you think the water's going? Well, into the drain. Well, I wonder where drains go. Where are there more drains? And this has actually sparked our emergent spring curriculum. We're like mapping our drains and sewers here at the garden and listening if they're flowing or not. So continuing on, it gets kind of full here. And so I kind of ask out loud to these two kids on the left, well, what else could you do? And they're like, oh, there's water up there. There's no kids up there. Like, yeah, so that'd be a great strategy. So there's also problem solving in these critical thinking skills. And the little one on the right, I was like, can you tell me what you notice? She's like, well, I noticed that the water is dirty. Well, I wonder why. Again, just asking these questions frequently gets those kids' wheels turning and really becoming a leader of their own learning. And so I think we're going to skip over this part today and just ask you all with that example. So our critical thinking, our play-based, emergent curriculum, developmentally appropriate ideas. If you have any questions for us today, we have about 5 minutes left.
I'm really really curious about the frequency of your programming and how long you have these kids with you each week.
Great question. At the Botanic Garden, we offer 2-day programs for our specific 3-year-olds, which run 2.5 hours. Our 4-year-olds come 3 days a week for 3 hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then our mixed ages, which is 3 to 5, they can come 2 days a week for 3 hours, Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Tuesday. And there's also an option for a 4-day class that also meets 3 hours, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, AM and PM. So it's always, it's right around that 2.5, 3 hour mark with the little ones at our institution.
Okay. What time do you begin in the morning or the afternoon?
Yeah, our classes begin at 9 a.m. and they'll run till 11:30 or 12. And then in the afternoon, we begin at 12:30 or 12:45. And this year we're doing a little bit staggered, more for COVID reasons. And then I believe Megan's program is very similar to ours.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to pop in our chat box hold on. Technology. I'm going to pop into our chat box the resource guide that we have put together for you all. It has books and ideas and that risk benefit analysis that Megan touched on. But if you do have further questions, we're happy to work with you outside and doing some consulting for you.
Are there any other questions while she's populating the chat box? No? Well, sorry about the technical glitch in the beginning. If you ever want to hear more about this topic, I think Sarah and I could probably talk all day.
Absolutely.
And I also want to let you guys know that we appreciate what you are doing because we know that you are getting kids out in nature, and now above all times is so important for the kids to have the healing that nature brings to them, adults as well. I know it's been a real benefit for me to be able to work with kids outside in nature during this past year. So kudos to all of you for doing the good work.
Thank you for that.
And thank you guys. This was very, very well done. And you gave me a lot of great ideas to bring back here to the Forest Preserve. So thank you.
Yay.
Fabulous.
Thanks. Thanks for your feedback.
All right, Sival, well, to respect your time, like we said, if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. Our email addresses are on that Google Doc as well. And we hope that you can embrace some of these ideas and see that learning is happening through play when you say yes. So, all right, everyone, have a great day today.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, thanks.
Bye.
Hi.
Hey, Julie. Sorry about that glitch.
So sorry. Thank you
No
for
worries.
figuring it out. I had no idea where to go. And yes, you saved the day.
You're welcome.
All right, bye, Julie.
Okay, I'll leave now. I have another meeting to go to.
All right. Hey, girl, you doing okay?
Yeah, that technology threw me for a loop in the beginning. Like share screen and then chat box and then trying to let people in and then how do you think it went?
It's so hard to tell because I could only see 2 faces. But I'm glad that I got to see Stacy and Mark's face because they were very receptive. And Mark is the sweetest guy ever. So his comments in the chat, he was doing such a kindness to us by letting us know that he was supportive and listening. So I appreciated that. I don't know. I hope it went well.